Ken, Melinda, y'all are wonderful. I love you. It's wonderful to have music like that. Sort of gets everything going. I have a lot of circulation going now that I might not have had without all of that. Well, the 4th of July, I hope that you had the time of your life. We had a lot of company and everything went so well that I can't say enough about it. It was really a great weekend for us. I'm still sort of hungover that just slipped out. What am I talking about?
Joy.
Yeah, joy. It's hungover from the joy of it all. But it sort of lingers on. Even my message, I wanted to talk about freedom because when you think about this country and the way it got started and all of the things that have gone into this thing of freedom, there's not too many countries. I'm trying to think of any. If you think of one that you could tell me about, but where people are trying to break in to where they can get to this freedom and the freedom of opportunity and things like that. You just have to go look at our border down there and the things that are happening right now. There are so many people that have it in their mind that this is the answer if they can just get through. And so it's a wonderful thing. I think sometimes we take things for granted. I hope that our freedom is nothing that you would ever think about taking for granted. Well, before I read a couple of things, I wanted to tell you how thankful I am for your prayers. It seems to me like I'm doing very well, making a very speedy recovery from titanium knee replacement. I like to use that word because I remember that's what Superman's made out of, right? So I like to identify with the strong ones. No, I did this last year too. It's a different message, but I didn't want to overlook reading from the Declaration of Independence and also mentioning that a lot of people and thought went into this, but it stretches all the way back. Do you know that it's strange to me how that I associate truth, I'll talk about that more later, but truth and freedom together. I think that's why that when Jesus said the words, and ye shall know the truth, and the truth shall set you free, this is really a very powerful statement. It wasn't just making up something that sounded nice, but it had to do with the essence of our being. But when we think about how many years all of this has taken and that we're not really around the world, we're not really there, it's like we're just kindergarten people as far as knowing and understanding about freedom. And I think that the same thing applies to our knowing about truth. I think Pat and I talk about the time and effort we spend in trying to be a part of the spiritual world, which you are, whether you know it or not. I mean, it doesn't, but intentionally being a part of spirit and living from spirit. But yet, when we think of ourselves and see ourselves in a true light, it's just like seeing kindergarten kids. And we're just sort of bouncing about, with this idea and that idea, but it's not like arriving at a destination. It's like beginning a journey or starting a journey. But the thing about the truth and freedom taking so long, you might want to think that God is slow, but that's not the problem. Do you know where the problem lies? People receiving the truth and then experiencing the freedom. This is where it comes in. It's nothing to do. The information has always been there. It's always been a part. Jesus, the teachings of Jesus have already, they've been there, and they've been used in so many different ways that it's just amazing. But that truth, whether it's from Jesus, whether it's from Eastern cultures, whatever, that's one of the other things that always is so amazing to me, is that people coming out of their religions in Eastern cultures and overcoming, and this is the hard part, overcoming the rituals and doctrines of that religion, and then going past it and discovering, and then you see people coming out of Christianity and working their way past the dogmas and the rituals, and they all sound alike when they're talking. When you begin to read people who have moved past all of those things, they all sound alike. And they're all saying the same thing, in that we are just simply one. So there was a teacher, Ram Dass. Do you know, have you heard this name? And one of the sayings, I haven't studied him a lot, but one of the things that where you hear it and it will never leave you, here's what he said. And this is talking about freedom and truth, but he said, we don't get out until we all get out. In other words, until the whole world gets out, then none of us. That's when we have freedom. It's when it's given out and it's universal. Okay, but let's read this. This is wonderful. I know you don't just sit around reading this every day, so you got a chance to hear me then. When in the course of human events, isn't that a wonderful start? When in the course of human events, it becomes necessary for people to dissolve the political bonds or bands that have connected them with another, and to assume among the powers of the earth the separate and equal station to which the laws of nature and of nature's God entitle them, a decent respect to the opinions of mankind requires that they should declare the causes which impel them to the separation. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men were created equal, and that they are endowed by their Creator with certain unalienable rights, that among these are life, liberty, and the pursuit of happiness. The words of Jesus. And he first started, and this is John the 8th, 34. If you hold to my teachings, you are really my disciples. Then you know the truth, and the truth shall set you free. And then again, this is following this about 4 or 5 more verses in verse 36. If the Son sets you free, you will be free indeed. When we think of the Son and the way he uses the word the Son, it isn't making him exclusive. So many have come along because that's what they want to do, is make what Jesus was exclusive. But then he keeps teaching us that we are all one, that we are all children of God, that we are all part of that oneness that makes up God. All right, so then spirituality and the truth that comes from this spirituality leads us in that direction, and then that direction gives us freedom. The thing that strikes me when I'm thinking about truth is that it's really hard to grasp, isn't it? Because there has been a time when you look at the Bible, don't you know that when King David, way back 1000 BC, was going to war, remember the scripture that it says it was the season that kings go out to war? course, that was the one he stayed home and found Bathsheba. But anyway, it was ordinarily the season that he would have been at war. Well, he was living to the limit of the truth he had. And of course, then, he only experienced the freedom that came from whatever that truth provided. So sometimes we don't have all the truth, but we may be right up to the point of the information. I don't like to do this really, but I'm going to give you a little pop quiz. No, I want an answer. I'm going to name a few things, and this, in keeping with the 4th of July, it's going to be about a president. And I'm going to name a few things, and don't, until I get through naming them all, like I'll hold up my hand or something, and then you tell me who it is. But don't just blurt it out. But now, think about this now. All right. He took office when he was 43 years old. He had been brought up a Roman Catholic. He gave his inauguration speech on a cold January day. And let's see what else we can say about him. Oh, he followed a very famous president who had been in office before him. Now, does that ring? You were holding your hand up. Who is this? What? John F. Kennedy. All right, let me tell you something. With the information you have, you're absolutely right. In that, if that was the only little segment of your life, you would be living the truth. I'm going to give you some more information that goes right along with this information now. All right? The year was 1933. The famous general that preceded him was named von Hindenburg. Uh-oh. Does that throw us off from your answer?
Are we still talking about the same president?
All the facts that I gave you, this is just more facts. I'm giving you more information now. I'm giving you more information now. Does it lead us to somebody else? Huh? Okay. This is what makes it so hard. Now, she's absolutely right with the information that she had. But now, see, I could have said, because everything had been equal, both took office. We're talking about Adolf Hitler, aren't we? He took office at 43. He was brought up Roman Catholic. He followed a famous general. He had, pardon?
33.
I mean, 33. What did I say? Well, anyway. Okay. Kennedy we'd say January of 61, he took office, see. And then he followed Eisenhower, right? In other words, we would have but everything up until a point was the same. Do you see? This is what makes it so difficult, because do you realize that there are people that love Jesus and that are in other pulpits today that would listen to me, and they probably couldn't do it because it's against the law, but they'd probably like to stone me. Because I have a little different point of view. I have a different point of view. And it is so threatening when we get out of our point of view. But what we're forgetting is that whatever truth we have, we probably, and they are probably right for them at that moment. You have to sort of give credit. That's why that if we're really true to our ideals, it's like Joe said earlier, we don't really proselyte, do we? We don't really go out and say, look, you guys are wrong and you need to come over and get right with us. I don't believe, Melinda, have you ever said that to anyone ever? Well, maybe Melinda, but not. There you go. But this is the idea, is that we have to leave people and respect them, and we have to give them all the room in the world for whatever truth they have reached at that moment and point of their life. And it may expand because if they're really searching, here's the problem. And I remember myself joining the Baptist church at age 17 or 18, one of those, right in there. But I was so glad that someone would come and tell me what the truth is. And that is a type of freedom, even coming from that point. That's a type of freedom when someone can come and tell you, and then you know what to believe, don't you? And if you forget, they'll remind you. So truth is one of those very elusive things that I've had a lot of thought about. I'm not saying I know everything about it or a lot about it, but I think about it a lot, do you see? Because I know how much that relates to my freedom. I want to share some other things. Just the idea of going back to this thing about Jesus referring to the sonship. The sonship in reference like this has to do with consciousness. It's the consciousness that was here on the planet to emphasize, not just create. The consciousness, the potential of the consciousness was always there. Everything that is God has always been everything that is God. I mean, we are the ones in our perception and getting ready for truth. Here's the problem, here's the rub, in that we have to ready ourselves for truth, but with that truth comes more what? Freedom. With that truth. Because we're freed up of so many things. I want to just hit on one other little item here that is so important to me. Indifference to the freedom that we have is one of the most horrible things that can come about. There's something about indifference that creates a vacuum. I think that's how that people who want to dictate or rulers that want to rule with no opposition, this is how they come in, because there may be a sense of indifference. And when you think of this and try to get it in perspective, I remember someone interviewing a man on the street in Iraq, and this is several years ago. This wasn't just recently with all these things that are happening now, but this is several years ago. And he said this, he said, when Saddam Hussein ruled, he said, we knew what to expect. He said, things were so much better then. I sort of went like this, I'm thinking, how could anybody think or say that? Well, it is the truth. It is the truth, possibly, that indifference to who rules and how much freedom we have creates. It's a creative force, the truth and freedom working together. I know there's a book that I read about 5 years ago by Deepak Chopra. And so while I was in the hospital, I reread it. And I didn't realize so much of how connected they were. And here's the name of the book. It's Truth, Freedom, and Grace. And he sort of showed how it all works together. And he sounded like some unity minister trying to teach this. And this is what I mean, coming out of the Hindu religion and working past all of the rituals and all of the dogmas. And then he begins to sound like a universal sound. Anybody that finally recognizes that everyone, that we are all one, and we are all part of the God energy of this universe. When we come to that conclusion, that takes out a lot of the dogma, doesn't it? Takes out a lot of it. I have a list of things here. Some things I wrote down. I could have made 100 of them, but I just made a few because I promised that I was going to try to be more brief. Briefer, is that a word? Briefer? How do you conjugate that verb? I know we have teachers here. No. Okay. But these are ideas, because I believe that a lot happens to us when we lock up things in our mind. It's like the mind itself is the greatest prison keeper on the planet, isn't it? We may think that being in prison could be the worst thing, but our minds, and our ego especially, have a tendency to capture us. Here's some thoughts. And this is freeing from this ego or prison of the mind. Feel neither beneath nor superior to anyone. Anyone. When there is no need to control other people. When you create space for others to be who they are and for your real self to be what it is. When you feel no need to defend your point of view. Is that hard for all of us, especially if, like myself, I'm a Southern Baptist minister, and you don't defend your point of view? What is going on? But you feel no need. There's nothing to defend. And then, when you no longer use stereotypes or harbor extreme likes and dislikes toward people you hardly know. When your speech is nurturing rather than scathing, you know you have broken free. Now, here's some of the feelings that you would experience. You feel happy and at ease instead of fearful and anxious. When you are free from good and bad opinions of others. When you no longer need to seek approval. Gee, that's a hard one. When you believe you are good enough as you are at this moment, and you believe that after all, the universe is on your side, then you have gone a long ways unlocking the prison that our mind holds us in and enjoying the freedom that God has given us freely. Now, truly to be free, just an idea to close with here. When we look out onto the world, at the people, at nature, and all we can see is God, and all we can feel is love, then we are truly free. Thank you.